First up, though, let's talk about an extraordinary, I think, extraordinary editorial in the BMJ, formerly known as the British Medical Journal. This, of course, is, the doctor's Bible. This is one of those magazines which every doctor will read and influences an awful lot of medical thinking. And their editorial this week has suggested that doctors should think less about the health of their patients and more about the health of the planet. Yes, they've gone on board with the climate change catastrophising as well. The editorial, published part of a special edition dedicated to COP26, of course, that climate summit coming in Glasgow in November, says that medical treatment contributes to greenhouse gas emissions, and this carbon footprint can be reduced if only health professionals actually learn to stop overdiagnosing and overtreating. As if that's the problem we've got right now. Let's talk about this with Ben Pyle. He's a writer, researcher, and also a contributor to Spiked Online. Good morning to you, Ben.
Good morning, Julia.
Now, I'm a very keen follower of yours on social media. You've been speaking out on a lot of climate issues for a very long time. I am absolutely flabbergasted by this. When I saw this piece in the BMJ, I assumed it was a spoof, frankly. I didn't believe it was real. We've literally got a magazine for doctors telling them they should spend less time worrying about the health of their patients and more time worrying about the health of the planet. This is terrifying.
Yeah, it is. I thought it was a spoof. I certainly thought one of the accompanying articles was a spoof. The one that suggested that it may not be sustainable to check so many people for cancer. It's simply nuts, and for many people, that's going to be enough of an explanation. But I think there's immense public pressure, which we don't really talk about, on public institutions of all kinds to align themselves to the green political agenda and medicine. Institutions of medicine are no exception to that, and I think that's ultimately going to be at the expense of patients.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, that's the thing is, it's across the board in the public sector, but it's also in the private sector. Everybody has to sort of, shout loudly from the rooftops about their green agenda. And then the criticism comes of those energy-intensive industries, which, of course, we're now talking about trying to save with government ministers on the show today. And yet, this a total lack of understanding often by those pushing this agenda of, frankly, how the country actually works.
Yeah, right. Well, what concerns me is that although there is there's a very superficial public discussion about where this is coming from, but a lot of it is coming from campaigning organisations that aren't unlike XR. In fact, they're affiliated to XR.
Extinction Rebellion, yeah.
Sorry, yes, Extinction Rebellion. Yeah, which is set up within professions. The professions or sectors to try and influence the way public institutions like medicine or other organizations are regulated and the way they do things. And that's going to include, in this case, what was revealed in the BMJ was the management of hospitals and the way patients are treated. The BMJ's editor is actually a senior member of such an organisation, the UK Health Alliance on Climate Change. And that sounds quite innocuous, but it is actually a partner of Extinction Rebellion. And I think we should judge it by the company it keeps, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a very big concern. I mean, also, there is so much among a lot of these organisations. Insulate Britain has been the one that's been irritating us all lately, Extinction Rebellion over the last few years. But a lot of their policies are, again, they want net zero, by 2025 or something? We are talking about the only way of achieving that is not just no one goes on holiday on a plane, no one flies, no one gets on a train, no one gets in a car, no one owns a car, no lorries, you can't eat meat, you got massively changing our lives. And there seems to be this incredibly, and this is borne out in this BMJ article, it's incredibly anti-human feeling. It's not pro-environment, it's anti-human. The idea that we are somehow a plague on the planet, and that our development, industrial revolution, which meant that people don't die at 35, and 3 of your 8 children don't die within a few hours of being born, and that we have healthy, worthwhile, interesting lives, that is somehow all a bad thing.
Right. I mean, it shouldn't surprise us that people with very deep green ideological views take a somewhat dimmer view of humans, of people, than we might expect from a doctor. And that's the problem, I think, is that once you've established those kind of principles or norms within medicine and the institutions of medicine, then what happens if you're a doctor who disagrees?
Yeah,
What happens
exactly.
if you think the BMJ line isn't a very good one, and you want to write something for the BMJ to say, well, let's take a better approach to this problem, whether that's climate change or human health. You're not going to get printed, or you may not even bother because you know that the editor of the BMJ isn't going to give
Yeah.
you a fair hearing.
And that's it. And medicine and science, we had this problem with the science, didn't we? It all to do with COVID. And we have that same issue with the science on climate change. Is when you stifle debate, you don't allow good ideas and evidence-based ideas to destroy bad non-evidence-based ideas. And everybody, of course, everyone now, the accepted science now is not the accepted science of 100 years ago or 200 years ago. Science on COVID, for instance, has changed massively in just a few months. So it is extraordinary, this idea that that these ideas should be so dominant and never questioned as well. I mean, there's even there's talk about adopting a largely plant-based health diet for the planet. Well, I mean, a lot of people have been cutting down their meat consumption, largely, sometimes for their health, sometimes for cost reasons, sometimes for, the waistband reasons. But these things shouldn't be being pushed sort of as something for the environment. They should be pushed by doctors only where it is in the patient's own medical interests.
Well, you're right, and they want to use the trust and respect and authority that doctors have in their communities and in society to try and to push a very political ideological line. It's essentially, I think, it's the political colonization of public and institutions and scientific institutions, and I think it will be ultimately for the worse for people's trust in science and people's trust in medicine.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure how to recover.
Yeah, I mean, genuinely, I think this is absolutely shocking. And I grew up as a GP's daughter with the BMJ always sitting in in the somewhere in the sitting room because my mum always read it, and I just find it absolutely shocking there should ever have been an editorial suggesting that doctors should think less about the health of their patients. I mean, I don't even know where we're going with that. Ben Pyle, writer, researcher, and contributor to Spiked Online, among other organisations. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Right now, let's look at another big Select Committee report out today. There've been a number, certainly that one on COVID is dominating all the news headlines. But